Republicans are playing with fire to end democracy, and you are likely to be the one who gets burned. Check it out. My left arm, not quite in a sling. Really, the shot's not that. I got my second shot yesterday, and my left arm feels a little sore. No big deal, and I'm fine, and I'm here, and it was the Pfizer shot. And, I recall back in the 70s, in the late 70s, getting I think it was yellow fever shot for a trip into Kenya, Uganda, and Somalia. And then later I got some other awful shot for a trip into Southeast Asia. And they hurt a lot more. and they disabled me a lot more. This is no big deal. So if you have not gotten your second shot and you have any reluctance about doing it, please just go ahead and do it. It's no big deal. And, you'll get through it. So anyhow, that's I'm here, and that's going on. In the second hour of our program today, I want to get into the Republican plot to turn America into an authoritarian state. And in our third hour, Kevin Camps, the nuclear waste specialist at Beyond Nuclear, is going to drop by. Fukushima water is about to be dumped into the sea. How is that radiation going to affect us, and Japan for that matter, and the world? I mean, this just ongoing disaster. So, there's all that. There's a lot going on in the news. The trial of the officer Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd is continuing. At the moment, they're in a recess or a sidebar or something like that. But a cardiologist has testified basically that, George Floyd had some early signs of heart disease, but that had nothing to do with why he died. He died because Derek Chauvin cut off his air supply for 9 minutes plus. And, it's becoming more and more obvious. And now we have also, this... it was just an incredible situation in Minneapolis, where this is going on. We had last night Daunte Wright was pulled over for a traffic violation in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, and in the process of getting arrested, he got out of his car. And then he got back in his car when they figured out he had a warrant, apparently. He got back in his car and was going to drive away. They shot him. He drove a short distance and his car crashed and he died. Now there are, I think, reasonably, appropriately, protests going on, some of which have involved vandalism. But, if they had just let him go or followed him, once they determined that there was a warrant, they could have arrested him, under dozens of other circumstances. But oh no, he's running away. We got to shoot him, right? Like what? He's like Dillinger? I mean, really? And then of course this black Army lieutenant. Now this was in Virginia, not in Minnesota, but Army Lieutenant Karan Nazario. And this was last December. It's just coming to light now because he's sued. And so the body cam footage had to, come out as part of the lawsuit. And we're seeing this, this guy just had bought an SUV. He was a lieutenant in the Army, which is a high rank. I mean, you've got to be a college graduate to qualify for that. And he's pulled over because he's driving a brand new car with the temporary tag taped inside the window, which we've all done. If you've bought a new car, I mean, I shouldn't say we've all done, but anybody who's bought a new car has done. And it's like, really? You're going to pull him over for this? And then you're going to pepper spray him in his car, and then you're going to drag him out and throw him down on the ground and handcuff him and humiliate him and continue to essentially torture this guy. I mean, it's just... Windsor police officer Daniel Crocker had radioed in that he was pulling him over because of the lack of a tag. This is just, it's ongoing. And to that point, my essentially rant for the day, which you can find over at hartmannreport.com if you want to see it directly, is titled Oligarchs Con White Boys, and I spelled it B-O-I-S. And what I'm saying is that these Republicans and white nationalists are playing with fire in their efforts to end democracy. And I think, frankly, what I just described in these two police incidents and the murder of George Floyd and so many others is like all the same stuff. It's no coincidence that Donald Trump and his supporters have this incredible affection for the Confederate flag, right? I mean, somehow they think that their whiteness will protect them from the consequences of ending democracy in America. And they are wrong. These people do not know the history of the Confederacy. The Confederacy was actually an by 1860. And, you know, you could argue that throughout its history, the Confederacy was this, but it really got rigid in the 1820s. And by 1860, it was an ethno-nationalist police state. It was run by a small group of families who were all plantation owners, Robert E. Lee's family being one of them. His plantation was taken away from him after the war and turned into Arlington National Cemetery. And this kind of iron-fisted oligarchy is exactly what Trump and his boys basically want to impose on all of America. And, you know, I mean, I've talked before about the slave patrols in the South. You know, the state militias were actually slave patrols, and that became essentially modern-day policing. And, of course, if you look at the modern white militia movement, these guys think that they're the slave patrols. And of course, the cops who you know, just threatened this lieutenant in the Army, or who just killed this young man in Minneapolis or in the neighborhood, and the cops who killed George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Eric Garner and Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice, and, you know, the list just goes on and on. But the Southern oligarchy wasn't just about slavery and racism. They practiced this absolute economic and political domination, a brutal domination, everywhere they had power, including against poor whites in the Confederate States. And again, you know, these white guys who are running around with Confederate flags don't know what the hell they're promoting. Poor white people, landless white people in the South could not vote. Or if they did vote, or if, you know, small white farmers, if they did vote, you know, the ballots boxes were stuffed or the ballots were burned. I mean, I lay all this out in my new book, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy. It started really with the cotton gin in 1820 because, you know, if you had a big plantation and you could afford to buy a cotton gin, one cotton gin could do the work of 50 hardscrabble white farmers or 50 enslaved Africans. And as a result of that, these giant plantations became massive plantations. They ran all the small white farmers out of business, turned them into sharecroppers, into tenant farmers, and, you know, bought up their farms and whatnot. And when poor whites tried to fight back, I mean, this is a quote from Carrie Lee Merritt's book, Masterless Men, Poor Whites in Slavery in the Antebellum South. Carrie Lee writes, poor whites made particularly inviting targets for a Southern legal system dominated by slaveholders. On the eve of secession, slaveholders were still jailing poor whites for small amounts of debt, publicly whipping white thieves and auctioning off debtors and criminals for their labor to the highest bidder. They were white people. In addition to the region's sophisticated legal system, the Old South also had an extremely effective extra-legal system to keep lower-class whites in their places. From vigilance committees to Minuteman groups, these organizations helped maintain both slavery and the Southern social hierarchy, and ultimately forced a divided region to wage an unwanted war. Matthew McConaughey, 4 years ago, made a movie about this, about a guy named Newton Knight, a white guy who challenged the oligarchs, the plantation owners. They lynched 10 of his white guys' buddies. But we still have these white guys running around going, oh yeah, we want the Old South. Man, they have no friggin' idea what they're talking about. Do you really want to turn America into a police state?